Hey class and Dr. Herzog, my name is Whitney Howell and I'll be discussing with you guys about volunteering within organizations. There are millions and millions of hours that are put in every year by volunteers. Without volunteers, many ideas and goals could go unfinished. The estimated value of a volunteer's time as of 2012 is $22.14. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, about 64.5 million people volunteered through or for an organization at least one time between September 2011 and 2012. That $22.14 hourly rate would come out to be around a $46,000 a year salary before taxes. So $22.14 an hour comes out to be $46,000 a year before taxes. This is money that they do not get because they are the volunteers. One of the issues is that many times the volunteer is undervalued. I chose this as an issue with public personnel because I myself am a current volunteer for a group called CASA, also known as Court-Appointed Special Advocates. So it seemed to fit the situation. But I personally feel as though my time and energy spent that I do not get paid for is well worth it because the supervisors of CASA do so much for us volunteers. They truly are like a second family to us all. Whenever we need them, they're there. Yet, when I speak to other adults, many of them don't even like volunteer work because bad experiences, bad supervisors, they don't even see the point when they could be working a real job and be getting paid. They don't see how it's even fair that they're not getting paid. So having a heart for volunteer work is a different topic, but having motivation to do so is definitely right in line with all of this. Organizations must find ways in order to make their volunteers feel valued, special, and important. They are not the same kind of people as employees are. Employees have their wage to motivate them, while volunteers have only the motivation that they make for themselves due to them being the ones who wanted to do the volunteer work in the first place. So, ways for organizations to make their volunteers feel valued. 1. Open communication. When a volunteer feels like they can openly communicate with their supervisor and that they feel like their words and ideas and what they're saying is actually being heard and thought about, they're going to automatically feel more valued in the work that they're giving. The supervisor needs to be interested in the volunteer's ideas. He or she needs to hear the volunteer out and let them speak what they feel. So that will bring value to what the volunteer feels. The volunteer is actually also going to receive good references from the supervisors for future jobs. And another way that supervisors could make their volunteers feel valued is to have an award ceremony for volunteers at the end of the year. Hand out awards to the volunteer who helped the most, and so forth. Ways to motivate volunteers. 1. Set goals. Set a lot of goals. That way, each of them, individual goals, group goals, anything. Just set something for them to actually reach and go towards so they can not just see a wall right in front of them. They need to see where they could be going and where they want to go. Give them rewards whenever those goals are met. Hold competitions between each volunteer. Have a group of volunteers compete against this group of volunteers and give them rewards for whoever reaches the goal first, and so forth. And even ideas as small as providing lunch, snacks, coffee in the morning, donuts, just the simple things, the little things that count and motivate people to actually come in and volunteer for your organization. But another issue with volunteer work in organizations is that some organizations dig really deep in making sure that they have the right people for their volunteer work, while other organizations just expect their volunteers to show up without even knowing who they are. For instance, I volunteered for an animal shelter. Now, this animal shelter was not on the small side either. It was in a bigger city. I figured they'd be more apt to go through an application process, but I was wrong. When I walked in and asked how I could volunteer and help out, they told me to just come on in, fill out a small packet of paper, and that was it. If I wanted, I could start right then and there. The problem I see with this is, yes, it was simple, it was hassle-free, and I got to start right away, but they didn't know who I was. They had no idea. They didn't know if I had maybe any type of animal cruelty charges, or anything. The paperwork I filled out was a short questionnaire about animals and my experience with animals. And that was it. They didn't even ask for a copy of my license. They looked at it, but they didn't do anything else. Nor did they ask me anything else. They didn't ask for even references or anything, even from my experience with other areas, not just with animals. Nothing. And organizations such as the group I'm associated with, CASA, all have their own prior requirements before they can even think about adding you to their organization. They want to check your background, see if your record is clean, and see how you are as a person before they even consider you. The process I personally went through with CASA is very thorough, considering that I'll be working with foster children. I received a background check, and that took a couple of weeks. Went to a 10-hour training just to meet the supervisors, all before I even got offered an interview. When it got to the interview process, they gave me a packet about 20 pages long and about over 100 questions, and I had to answer all of them. And once I answered all of them, we sat down for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and we went through every single question. These questions ranged from what I thought about myself to if I had family members that were drug addicts and ever gone to prison. They were some people would say they were intruding, but they were just very in-depth. This is where another issue comes into play. I feel as though it should be necessary for organizations who are asking for volunteers to be extensive in their research into their volunteers. That way they know who's working for them. At the same time, though, I know it would be extremely time-consuming. So this causes for the organization to come to the fork in the road when they must choose whether or not they want to risk not truly knowing the type of people that they have in their organizations. And that can be pretty scary. So the next thing I'm going to talk to you about is the danger of accepting just anyone as a volunteer. One, the obvious, you don't know who they are. If you're just allowing people to come in, fill out an application, and be done with it, and the application is questions about animals and your experience with animals, you're not going to know anything about them. You don't know their true experience. You can't even check any references because you didn't ask for references. You don't know their criminal history. You don't even know how their work ethic is, or if they have integrity, if they're strong-willed, if they're willing to even go in and work or volunteer. And then, this might be far-fetched, but they could have an ulterior motive and destroy your organization. It's possible. So, what I feel is a solution is to require organizations to have a specific extensive application process that involves drug testing, a reference list, the prior job history, experience, and also ask them the usual yes or no question of whether or not they've been convicted of a felony. After that, the organization should take all of that information and actually check through it, check their references, do a background check, ask their past supervisors how they worked, how they were ethically, and how their integrity was, how their communication skills were, how if they called in a lot for work and didn't show up, they need to know these things. And so after they do all that, this will allow for the organization to actually talk with others who have experience working with these people. It will definitely help them out in the long run. Definitely. So, in doing research about volunteer work in organizations, I've found many organizations are very neutral in how they allow people to volunteer with them. On top of that, many volunteers are undervalued and do not feel as important as they should. This could be very detrimental to many organizations in the fact that they could eventually lose their volunteers to the lack of motivation and value. If they don't show value and they don't motivate their employees or their volunteers, they could lose them easily. So, to fix this is simple, but it must be done fast, soon. Organizations require a more extensive application in order to weed out anyone not qualified to be a volunteer, and also figure out more unique ways to motivate and make their volunteers feel valued. This must be done soon in order to prevent a decline in volunteers around the United States. And that is my presentation about volunteering in organizations. And thank you so much for listening.